Thank you everyone for attending the second installment of the Exodus Missio Day, the mission of God for Black communities. In 2019, African Americans observed our quadcentennial of displacement to the shores of North America, discerning the spiritual and socio-economic missions behind our relocation, birthed Black American faith systems throughout the United States and concentrated them in Black urban centers like Atlanta, Georgia. Black faith institutions historically investigated the mystery of the divine through Afrocentric worship rituals and also spawned community-based organizations that launched the Black liberation struggle to the American mainstream. 400 years later, large portions of the Black American worship tradition thrives within the heart of Black faith centers as in generations past. The larger question for today is ascertaining the status of the Black liberation movement within Black faith spaces in Atlanta and throughout the nation. There are relevant questions for theologians, faith leaders, and faith practitioners to ask.
Right.
Questions we want to ask. Do current Black socioeconomic measurements indicate a withdrawal of Black faith institutions from serving as the front line of African American liberation? Lastly, can the practice of Sankofa and the thorough investigation of the religious liberation movements of our ancestors prompt today's African American community to revive central commonalities of purpose across age, religious, class, and gender lines? With me this morning are three of Metro Atlanta's leading pastors, teachers, activists, and authors to discuss their contributions to the Atlanta Black Faith Mission. Each of you have 3 minutes to introduce yourselves, introduce healthy spiritual practices that benefit the Black experience, and address any of the points delivered in my opening. Speakers, please introduce yourself in this order. Our first special guest, curriculum developer, public speaker, and business owner, Karima Hanifa. Next, our second special guest, ordained minister and graduate student pastoral care counselor, Leisha Allman. And finally, author of The Black Church Empowered and Macedonian Missionary Baptist Church senior pastor, our keynote, Isaiah Robertson. Karima, take us away.
Good morning. My name is Karima Hanifa. I am an Atlanta native. I am formerly incarcerated. Being formerly incarcerated and directly impacted by the criminal justice system, I realized firsthand that there are some barriers that are in place, not just upon reentry back into community, but there are also barriers in places during the time of my incarceration. One of the barriers that I faced coming home was the barrier of background checks. And so that is where my entrepreneurship kicked in at, where I decided that I would create an alternative route, which was to create my own business so that I did not have to deal with being questioned about why I did not have a job history for the past 26 years. I also, while I was incarcerated, one of my spiritual practices that I found very impactful was fasting. So I'm Muslim, and I picked up a practice just out of distress while I was incarcerated to fast every other day, absolute fast, which is no food or drink from sunrise to sunset, which helped me to center myself because I realized I could not control my environment, but I could control myself in the way that I responded in certain situations. And out of that fasting and meditating and just kind of centering and sourcing was the development of a educational framework that I created to meet the needs for Iman Atlanta, in which I am leading the No Taxation Without Representation campaign for the state of Georgia, which basically means that disenfranchised citizens or people who are cannot vote, are prohibited to vote because they are currently on probation and parole in the state of Georgia. So just imagine the 266,000 votes that were not allowed to even be viewed this year for election. And with that, I'll pass it on to our next guest.
Hi, I'm Leisha Allman. I am a child of generations of ministers and preachers and a child of the civil rights movement. You mentioned Sankofa, which literally means to go back and get it. And it refers to the importance of reaching back to knowledge that was gained in the past and bringing it into the present in order to make positive progress. We now have enough Black history lessons and lived experience that can teach us how we survived, starting out as slaves and emerged to become never truly liberated or free members of society, but rather more liberated and freer members of American society, and even holding in small degrees political and economic leadership positions. And most of that was forced and maintained by the federal government's economic and punitive threats to those who opposed our rising status in this democracy. But now, unfortunately, to our discredit, in just 2.5 generations after the civil rights movement's gains, we have and are increasingly abandoning our once collective strength, which was rooted and grounded in maintaining family and spiritual relationships. The concept of Sankofa urges us to go back and get it. Go back and review that historical knowledge and use it to survive what's coming toward us. Because now more than ever, we are troubled on every side, facing the real threat of becoming not one, but 2 or 3 types of oppressed slaves. Number one, there is an emerging threat to the very democratic notions that enabled us to even rise within American society. Number two, there is a threat to all people of color in an escalating economic class war. And number three, there is a threat to our ability to rely on the past effective strength of family and spiritual unity. Over the past 8 years, the government restraints that protected our civil rights have been progressively abandoned and revealing just how many in our country resent our present status and seek to restore us to subservience. We need to go back and examine our history and see how in the span of just 2 generations, we find ourselves on a largely reverse path back to slavery. And while examining that same history, we need to see how to survive in this increasingly hostile American society. And that society, which was once democratic, is now fast tracking itself into a fascist policy. And while we have legitimate complaints about oppressive notions, complaints without active attempts at solutions is little more than whining. And we can't whine forever. And we can't wait for others to do what we can and must do for ourselves to preserve our empowering legacy. This is our responsibility alone. We must remember or learn how we survived slavery and understand that we must revive the cultural strengths that helped us in the past. And this is what I mean by Sankofa and the power of spiritual and family community legacy. We can learn from the spiritual family historical legacy practiced by the Jews who have taken steps to never again revisit the Holocaust. But more importantly, we can learn from our own historical legacy about how not to lose another generation. We can go back and get those lessons and use them as we struggle to survive the increasing threats to our relatively limited freedom. I'm done.
Well, I'm excited to be on this morning with all of my esteemed panelists. It truly is an honor and a privilege. My name is Isaiah Robertson. I'm a pastor, senior pastor of the Macedonian Missionary Baptist Church in the thralling metropolis of Cartersville, Georgia. Get it right, we growing. I'm also the author of a book that came out this past August entitled Black Church Empowered. The book really introduces an organization that I launched simultaneously with the book with the same title, Black Church Empowered. Husband, 1 wife, father of 5 children. Yes, 5. So I appreciate your prayers. And really just love the conversation that we're going to have. Really excited to engage. Spiritual practice that helps me is community, right? Recognizing and realizing we are an interdependent people, shunning rugged American individualism at all cost, and realizing that I need My neighbors. I need wisdom from my ancestors. I am not an island unto myself, and just engaging with my brothers and sisters in this struggle, and realizing that I need to draw from their strength as they draw from mine. So community is a huge spiritual practice, ensuring that I'm connected, not just to God, but also to his people all over this world. So yeah, man, just really excited. My sisters, I'm really excited, and I'm just ready to have the conversation.
COVID-19 revealed that overall, our Black faith centers are now challenged in reaching our Black youth where they live and grow as in generations past. And Leisha, I will hand that to you first, but I do want to hear from everyone else as well.
I will say that COVID-19 has not revealed, it just further revealed. It's been long known that the church is losing impact. And COVID-19 is not a revealer, it's just another revealer.
How do we get it back?
Education, that's the way we started. After the Civil War, the Black church stood up. And instead of complaining that they wouldn't allow us to go into academic environments, that's how HBCUs got started. And it was in my church where I learned a lot of Black history. We need to go back. It's hard to go forward without knowing where you came from. You don't have to keep starting from scratch.
Isaiah, is it possible to begin to repurpose some of the infrastructure in this time of COVID-19? A lot of churches have and other faith centers have begun to host young people in small numbers. Do you see that as a legitimate service opportunities that our faith communities can offer right now?
Yeah, I ultimately think that what we have to understand in this moment, right? Well, we're rushing to have the best, Facebook platforms, StreamYard platforms, Instagram platforms, right? What's ultimately going to contribute to the sustaining legacy of the Black church and the Black Christian tradition is whether or not we're meeting the core concerns of young people, right? Whether or not we're ministering to them, not just spiritually, but existentially, and seeking to, build a bridge, right, into their lives, into their lived situations, and not just building a bridge so that we can walk over there, wave, and walk back to our own, little insulated enclaves, but so that we can build a bridge and bring resources, right? Build a bridge and carry over things that will ultimately uplift them and benefit them in ways that just preaching to them won't. So I think we're in a moment where we're scrambling to be relevant, right, when it comes to our technology and our presentation via social media. But if we had been meeting the core concerns of younger demographics, historically, then this would just be a speed bump rather than the huge issue that we're finding it to be today. So yeah.
Thank you. Karima, I want to finish up with you on impact. We're talking about a generation of young people now who are going to have extended time in the home. Since COVID-19 has shut down schools in Atlanta and around the nation, domestic violence rates have spiked, unemployment rates have spiked. We're really talking about the home as a place of varying degrees of stability for our young people. And again, I will even contextualize this the ways in which I was disciplined as a Black Southern boy. Oh, you talking about getting a hold to you. And now we are dealing with that scenario and cultural adaptation with parents who may be out of work, frustrated. Talk about what is on the line here if faith centers dodge this issue or continue to play it as a non-issue.
I think that even prior to COVID, that our youth felt very displaced. They felt very misunderstood. There isn't a large connection when Brother Isaiah talks about that bridge, right? and how we're all interconnected. But there's a bridge between our people our ages, right, and then our youth. There's a disassociation that we have with our younger selves that allows us not to be able to penetrate that wall. It prevents us from touching the core of who they are and who they're developing and becoming. And I think that is just very, very important that we practice safety, but that we do not forget to be compassionate, that we do not forget to be, to have empathy and to continue to serve those in the community and to outstretch ourselves to our youth. Because if we continue to separate ourselves spiritually, emotionally, mentally, and psychologically, then we lose our youth. Our youth are our future leaders. And it's very important that especially with social media being the way that it is, a lot of first should understand that a lot of what we see on social media is not necessarily accurate. It's not something that is a continuum. And so I think it's very important that we reach out to our youth and show them ways to be of service. Or what happens is as we become older, we don't have anyone to take care of us. We don't have anyone to address our social needs, our social issues, our community issues. And so while we're being safe, I think it's just important to remind them to be safe, but to continue to reach out to them, even in a time such as now where everything is virtual, that platforms are important. When we can't touch them physically, that we create a platform where we can still gather, the minds of the youth and ask them, what are their needs? How can we assist them in being successful?
Even in the end of the 19th century, we see Black elites argue that if they invest solely in Black communities, that they're drawing the same color line that they're claiming to protest against. And we kind of see this double consciousness as really circumnavigating the entire question of Black socioeconomics. Is it even fair to assume we do have a Black socioeconomic plan right now within Black faith centers? And how would we like to take steps to develop one? And I will put that out to the group.
I think as the walls of segregation came down, to your point, Ronald, you saw many within our community not just celebrate the fact that they could attend the same schools as white folks, eat at the same counters as white folks, but they took it a step further and actually assimilated into white culture. All right, they embraced this idea of the American dream, found a way to spiritualize it, and now you have the Black church, which always was sort of an alien voice,
right,
in this country, right? In a lot of ways, in a lot of churches, now aligned with the aims and efforts of advanced capitalism, and that's been to the detriment of our people. I don't think that there is a plan. There needs to be, but before we can create a plan, we first have to step back and understand that we are in bed with the very systems and structures that's continuing the socioeconomic oppression and disparities of our people, and we have to come out from among them, right? We have to come out of these temples built to these corporations, and that is going to take conversations like this. That is going to take a lot of re-education, and I think that's what has to be done on the front end. I think it's happening. I think you have faith leaders, particularly within more, because it's going to take our brothers and sisters that are in more conservative spaces, right, to begin to also speak up as well. And I think that's happening, but it's got to happen more. It's got to be wider and broader. So
I agree. I think that we have to learn, as we've always had, to be in two places at the same time. It is true that after the Civil War, in addition to HBCUs, we had the church stepped up. We had the Freedmen's Bureau. They started their own banks. One thing that I noticed, from before the civil rights movement and after civil rights movement, when you have a common foe, even enemies will come together to fight it. But then the problem is once that battle was won, people tend to go back. And see, and this is why I mentioned the Jews, because what happened is after the civil rights movement and we got some gains, we thought we were in a promised land and didn't realize that we were in a wilderness. And so we failed. We failed, but then I'm not blaming us, I'm just explaining because we had no previous history to refer to. We did not know that this wasn't going to be going forward. We did not know then. And so instead of holding on to our history, which gave us the momentum to even fight for those civil rights, we just began to enjoy the benefits of it. And we passed on the benefits to our children without passing on the legacy of how we got those benefits. We didn't have Friday dinners where we revisited the history till it became part of our natural memory as if they were there. And so in that sense, our generation failed the children underneath us, but we didn't know. But now we do know. And so we have two generations that are for the most part lost. And so we need to focus our attention on the emerging generations because we're at a start over point. You know, we need to do the things that like Karima's doing, using her experience to help others who find themselves threatened or in that experience. We need to do like Pastor Robertson is doing within the church, taking responsibility for growing the members, not just preaching or hollering or screaming at them, but growing them. We have to revisit how we came to be where we are today.
I want to interject and offer a little bit of pushback to what you said, Alicia. I'll be very interested to your reply. I think you crystallize the mission behind my organizing efforts, Exodus. Going off of what Pastor Robertson said a moment ago, we must abandon these idols. We must understand that our salvation is going to come through our collective action. And I just got our 10-minute warning, so we're going to make sure we be concise. Does the Exodus provide us a lens for understanding how we can galvanize a socioeconomic solution, understanding that we must draw from the full cross sections of our community to make our Exodus road from this system of racialized apartheid? And after you, Alicia, I would love to hear your responses to Karima, and then we'll begin to wrap this conversation up.
I think that's what I was referring to when I said that we split and divided after the civil rights movement gains.
Gotcha.
You know, we didn't, as we were moving forward, we didn't reach back and bring along others. We just began enjoying the fruits. And that's where our failure was.
Excellent.
But we are responsible for our own advances.
Thank you for that. Karima, your response?
I'm definitely, I understand your point of view, Ronald, but I definitely also understand the importance that Ms. Almond is stressing because there's a quote, I'm not sure who said it, but the best way to erase a group of people is to erase their history, right? And so I think it's important to see every step forward that we've made, right? To acknowledge and recognize the work that has been put in place in order for us to have even the pieces of freedom that exist now. I think that's very important. And also, I wanted to just kind of put that in there too. When we start talking about our spiritual communities and we talk about our community at large, it is, I think that's where like the grassroots movement has always existed and where it comes into place at. It's very important that we stay connected to the issues and the concerns of the community. And in those issues and concerns of the community, I think is a conversation that has emerged that the spiritual leadership is not doing the work that they should be doing when it comes to being responsible for our youth and the group of individuals that are coming out now, that are coming forward now. I think that we are all largely responsible for each and every young person that pushes up behind us, right? And I think that when Sister Almond talks about, reaching back, right? That is, while they represent our future, we must reach back to make sure, because our young people are emotionally struggling, physically they are struggling. And I think that it's a responsibility for spiritual institutions such as the mosque, the church, the synagogues, to be responsible for our youth, because our morals and values, in spite of what people may think who do not believe in God, who do not believe in a spiritual power larger than themselves, our morals and values and the way we determine what is right and what is wrong comes from the foundation of that Old Testament. I'm sorry, anybody who says that it doesn't, who says that stealing is wrong? The word says that it is wrong. Who says that killing is wrong? So that's where our morals and values come from. And so it's important to keep our youth culturally and spiritually developed so that they can thrive and so that they can flourish. Like, this is just very, very important. I cannot stress it enough.
Some pastors, preachers that will not support the decriminalization of marijuana simply because they believe that smoking marijuana is a sin before God. Now, let me say that I don't smoke marijuana. You know what I mean? It's not something that I engage in recreationally. However, if that happens, and if we could get thousands of petty marijuana charges overturned, which would mean the freedom of potentially thousands of Black bodies from this corrupt injustice system here in this country. And I think what we're going to have to, as a faith community, hold in tension and in conflict, right? Our personal sort of moral views of things like marijuana, and as you mentioned, this overarching Exodus narrative, right? That presents a God who is liberative, and a God who deplores this system that imprisons men and women, primarily Black men, for no reason, when white people are getting a slap on the wrist for the exact same exact same crime. So yeah, I think it's going to require us to really step back and talk about these things honestly.
Excellent. We got 3 minutes left. Leisha and Karima would love to hear from you, and we'll do a very brief wrap up.
I think that we need to become part of the system that is creating this problem. I actually, I tutor LSAT students. I've gone into a few churches and offered to tutor their students for free. The churches weren't interested. The fact of the matter is, this is the society we live in. The majority is always going to have the advantage. We're always going to be at a disadvantage. But if we take the lesson from the women's movement, it's not until you become part of the system that you are able to legislate things on your behalf, on your interests. And so we need to encourage our students to enter legal system.
Against you all, just thank you for a beautiful morning. This conversation must be extended, but my pride and thanks to all of you. God bless us all.